Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 89 based on novel. So let's start. The Emperor and Imperial Preceptor didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This devil cult master was really daring and had no reserve being the devil cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult. He actually wanted to pull the Emperor and Imperial Preceptor into his Heavenly Devil Cult. If your injuries aren't healed, you won't be able to seize back the throne, and learning handicraft from our Heavenly Saint Cult, you could at least feed your family, Qin Mu persuaded. Furthermore, if you enter the cult now, I can give you guys very high positions like the Heavenly King or Elder, while if you want to join after you are completely crippled and unsavable, I can at most make you incense masters and only a vice at that. Madam, help me persuade them. Imperial Preceptor's wife smiled, but didn't say anything. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said indifferently, if I join, I want to be the cult master. Emperor Yang Feng nodded. Me too. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, if you're the cult master, I'll assist you. Qin Mu's eyes lit up. Emperor wants to be the cult master. Emperor Yang Feng was flabbergasted. He totally didn't expect Qin Mu to actually have the plan to give up the seat of Heavenly Devil Cult Master. If the Emperor became the Heavenly Devil Cult Master, wouldn't Eternal Peace Empire be part of his Heavenly Devil Cult? This was truly a hot potato that he couldn't pick up. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor also got a headache and looked secretly toward Emperor Yang Feng, signaling him to not take. Imperial Preceptor's wife laughed and said, Cult Master Qin, they aren't willing, but I am. I wonder what kind of position Cult Master could give me. Qin Mu's eyes lit up, and he exclaimed secretly at the cleverness of this woman. She had broken the silence to prevent Imperial Preceptor and the Emperor from becoming awkward. If Madam joins the cult, I can give you a sinecure. Qin Mu smiled. Does Madam know embroidery? How about the incense master of Embroidery Hall? All right. The young married woman then smiled and pulled Imperial Preceptor to one side and said in a low voice, Husband, why do you have to reject Cult Master Qin? What are the odds of winning by going back to the capital city this time with His Majesty? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was silent for a moment, then said, Everyone in the world supports the reform and 70 to 80% of the civil and military officials in the Imperial Court are the men of His Majesty and I. When we return to the capital city, we can definitely execute the rebels and seize back the throne. Imperial Preceptor's wife smiled. Do you really think so? Won't Great Thunderclap Monastery and Dao Sect stop you? If it's you, you might be able to defend yourself against Rulai and Dao Master, but will His Majesty be able to defend himself against them? Qin Mu nodded lightly and smiled. There are Taoists and monks staying in the houses of all the kings, dukes and ministers. They are all chanting Dharma, or reciting Daoist scriptures. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was silent, and his wife pushed Qin Mu away to continue in a low voice. The other two big sacred grounds are watching your people, and those that are closed to you are either under house arrest, or locked in prison. Now, you can only borrow power from Cult Master Qin. And to borrow someone's power, you need to make them feel at ease. Qin Mu moved over again, and was about to say something when Imperial Preceptor's wife pushed him away. Imperial Preceptor pondered it for a bit, then walked over to Qin Mu. Heavenly Saint Cult lacks a Heavenly King. Qin Mu nodded. The fourth Heavenly King. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor then said, Let me be this fourth Heavenly King, however, His Majesty can never have any connections with Heavenly Saint Cult. Your Majesty, I shall join His Heavenly Saint Cult. Emperor Yang Feng was stunned, but after quite a while, he said slowly, Sorry to put Imperial Preceptor at such an inconvenience. Qin Mu revealed a smile and said to Emperor Yang Feng, Your Majesty seems to have a misunderstanding regarding our Heavenly Saint Cult. We aren't a cult, and our philosophy is the everyday use of common people, and what we carry out is the path of the saint. This reform of Your Majesty and Imperial Preceptor has similar ideals. Imperial Preceptor's wife smiled. Cult Master, we should be on our way. There's no need to impart cult's teachings to His Majesty since it's impossible for him to join our Heavenly Saint Cult. Imperial Preceptor's wife went to sit on the back of the dragon Qin while Qin Mu, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and the Emperor walked below. The two people executed Overlord Body 3 elixir technique that Qin Mu had taught them to recover some vital qi. These two people were like ascetic monks. Their footsteps weren't fast and they walked with great effort, so they reached Venerate Prefecture only after close to 3 days. Heavenly Devil cult in Venerate Prefecture had already prepared the herbs, and Qin Mu could finally treat the injuries in Emperor Yanfeng's soul. Imperial Preceptor's external injuries were all healed while the remnants of the divine arts left behind by the god in his body were not something Qin Mu could guide out. The remnants of the god's divine arts were extremely powerful. But if Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor could refine them, it would no longer be too troublesome for Qin Mu to cure him. The crucial point was that Imperial Preceptor couldn't mobilize his magic power. The remnants were hidden in his body and divine treasures, so he had to use his own magic power to suppress them. If he wasn't careful, he might just trigger the power of those divine arts. Neither the Emperor nor Imperial Preceptor can fight. Qin Mu sighed ruefully to himself. The two strongest practitioners of Eternal Peace Empire had both become sickly people that required his care and protection. As for himself, he was continuously cultivating without a break. As long as he was walking, Overlord Body 3 elixir technique was subconsciously executed and the 5 beams of star power from the stars would come pouring down. While they were on their way, Qin Mu also trained his sword skills diligently, practicing the 2 forms of sword skills village chief had taught him again and again, trying to perfect them. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor saw these 2 moves from Sword Picture, he gave a soft cry of astonishment, and couldn't resist taking a few more looks. Cult Master, which elder taught you this? My village's village chief, the eldest one. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor pondered over it for a moment, then said, You are trying to incorporate the 3 basic sword forms that I founded into these 2 sword skills. They are already perfect, so adding my basic sword forms would disrupt the balance. The power is increased, but many flaws have appeared. Why did you do this? Qin Mu executed Sword of Founding Emperor Sea of Blood and suddenly had a feeling of sorrow. Sword of Founding Emperor, Sea of Blood, mountains and rivers exist in a vast and obscure heart, but when looking around left and right, there are no more people donning the clothes of homeland. This was a lonely reminiscence of one's homeland, the long-gone martyrs. It had the mood of sorrow and heroism. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor picked up a branch and said, There are still numerous flaws in your moves, so why don't I feed you some moves? Qin Mu's eyes lit up and he smiled. Please guide me. I dare not. Qin Mu also fetched a branch, and the 2 of them used tree branches as swords. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor attacked, while Qin Mu used Sword Picture to defend. However, after just a moment, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had broken through a flaw and destroyed sword treading mountains and rivers. Qin Mu pondered for a long time. The flaw Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had pointed out was different from what Village Chief had pointed out. Both of them were grandmasters in sword skills, but the path each of them took was different. Village Chief's sword skills had a passionate and intense feeling while Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's moves were calm. It was like he was opening a door, pushing forward the reform to open up new horizons. Their philosophies were different, so their sword skills were naturally different as well. Getting pointers from them allowed Qin Mu to receive different benefits. Village Chief's pointers had pushed Qin Mu into exhausting his knowledge, to the point his foundation wasn't enough to continue improving these 2 moves. However, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's pointers opened up a new path for him, making him able to continue improving his sword skills. They cultivated as they walked, and Qin Mu's comprehension of his sword increased more and more. He felt like his sword skills were about to cross to another level, but no matter what he did, there was always a veil preventing him from crossing over. No need to practice anymore. No matter how much you practice, there won't be any improvements anymore, said Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. If you want to break through, you will need your own enlightenment. Qin Mu was puzzled, but Emperor Yanfeng, who was beside him, understood what Imperial Preceptor was saying and sighed ruefully. Another step further and you'll be a little grandmaster. Minister Qin, to reach such a level at such a young age. When I reached that step back then, I was already 57 years old. I cultivated 9 Dragons Monarch technique to draw the chi of the 9 dragons, which resulted in boundless vital chi. Only when I felt the movement of the dragon chi under the earth and the general situation of the world that was bustling with unpredictable activity, did I break through in one go. You're some 40 years faster than me. Qin Mu smiled. Your Majesty, what's the expertise of your 9 Dragons Monarch technique? My expertise is transformation, Emperor Yangfeng said solemnly. If you want to learn, I can teach you. Before me, 9 Dragons Monarch technique was a technique that was only proficient in spells, but after it landed in my hands, any spells, sword techniques, corporeal body divine arts could be executed. Why? Because dragons signify transformation. They can be big and small, visible and invisible. They can soar into the sky and also dive into the deep sea, hide in the abyss and lay in the fields. They can move clouds and bring rain. They can burn the sky with a raging inferno, and they can control a tempest. Do you want to learn it? He thought that Qin Mu would reject, because he was the devil cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult, a reputable figure. That's why he was caught off guard when Qin Mu said without a thought, yes. Emperor Yangfeng was stunned and suddenly laughed out loud. Oh well. Who says 9 Dragons Monarch technique is the technique of our Ling family and can't be imparted outside? I'll teach you. Imperial Preceptor's wife looked at Emperor Yangfeng in astonishment, while Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had a calm expression. His Majesty is such a person, heroic and candid. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to use me. I've already seen the original copy of 9 Dragons Monarch technique more than 10 times. Emperor Yangfeng taught Qin Mu 9 Dragons Monarch technique, how to circulate his qi, as well as how to operate the qi of the 9 dragons. This technique was different from Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique, and it turned one majestic and imposing if they executed it. At the same time, it was full of changes and one's every movement contained the mighty force of heaven and earth. 9 Heaven's Divine Dragon Shroud is a spell that can transform into 9 true dragons, which can hide in clouds to attack the enemy. Look! Emperor Yangfeng aroused his vital qi, and a palm-sized cloud came out 3 inches from the top of his head. A few dragon qi that were fine like earthworms bore fangs and brandished claws fiercely. When Emperor Yanfeng's vital qi was depleted, the cloud and dragon qi puffed out, vanishing. Emperor Yangfeng mumbled while panting, I have no more magic power, but you should have seen what I mean. Qin Mu nodded and executed his Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique, fusing 9 Dragons Monarch technique with Overlord Body Vital Qi. Dragons suddenly appeared faintly in mid-air, and 9 dragons stretched their claws out to shatter the mountain rocks, in a radius of dozens of yards around them. Emperor Yangfeng was stunned, and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was also beyond astonished. They saw 9 dragons circling in the sky. They then suddenly transformed into fire dragons, and as the blazing fire revolved in the sky, the fire dragon tornado appeared around them, and lifted their bodies up. The fire dragons then transformed and controlled water, lifting them up while using it. Lightning then burst forth and crackled as it struck everywhere. Emperor Yangfeng and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor looked at each other, and saw astonishment in the other's eyes. This 9 Dragons Monarch technique was just mastered by Qin Mu, and he already seemed like he had cultivated it for 10 or 20 years. He just picked the technique, and was already much better than most of the princes in Imperial College's Royalties Park. Qin Mu dispersed 9 Heaven's Divine Dragon Shroud, and Emperor Yangfeng taught him everything he had learned and comprehended. He sighed at the end. If your surname was Ling, how wonderful would that be? There were only 2-3 days left to the capital, and it was also 3 days till the Crown Prince's Ascension on the 6th of the 3rd month. At that moment, a huge bird flapped its wings and landed on the ground with a tumble, transforming into a woman in green, who bowed in front of the group. Sacred teacher, everything is prepared. Qin Mu nodded and said, you can go ahead first. As you command. The woman turned back and ran 2 steps, before shaking her body to grow 2 wings on her back and soaring into the sky. Since Great Thunderclap Monastery and Dao sect can kill an emperor, my Heavenly Devil cult can do so as well, otherwise, how can we be the #1 sacred ground of the devil path? Qin Mu said in a soft voice. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor frowned. What's your plan? Enter the capital, kill the emperor. As they got closer and closer to the capital city, the scouts on the way also gradually increased in number. Even though there was a natural disaster outside, the places closer to the capital were still celebrating peace with songs and dance. Numerous trees were tied with red silk, and there were many envoys from numerous countries hurrying to the capital. The ascension of a new emperor was naturally no small matter. It was especially so when the new emperor had shown himself to be different from the previous ruler before he even ascended the throne. He was kind to foreign countries, and was willing to form alliances with them. During the previous dynasty, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor liked to mobilize his army to swallow surrounding countries. He would press the other big countries against the ground to beat them and seize their territories. Either that, or he would force the other side to submit to him and offer tribute. He was truly rampant. Before Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had mobilized his army to enter Great Ruins, that was when Eternal Peace Empire had been at its strongest. It could battle against 5 big countries at the same time, but after Imperial Preceptor got injured by assassins, the momentum of Eternal Peace Empire expansion started to slow down. The new emperor, however, was cultured and refined, very polite, and treated all sects of Eternal Peace kindly. He was also courteous to the envoys of the foreign countries. Not only did he return the lands that the fiendish Imperial Preceptor had conquered back to their respective owners, but even promised to pay reparations, and was willing to repair the relations with those countries. The rule of foreign countries having to submit to eternal peace was also abolished by the new emperor, so they were all very happy and praised him endlessly. They said that the new emperor Ling Yuxia was a wise ruler that was rare to see in the past 1,500 years. Other than that, the new emperor that had yet to ascend the throne invited members of various sects to attend the Ascension ceremony. There were rumors saying that the new emperor planned to write down a decree of his crimes, and would take on the wrath of heaven for the past years of reform. He would seek forgiveness from heaven and pray it would punish him, and let off the people of Eternal Peace Empire. This move is the most ruthless. Qin Mu was exclaiming endlessly in admiration. He told Imperial Preceptor and the Emperor, "You guys tried to painstakingly reform for 200 years in order to change the profane notions, to push paths, skills, and divine arts to develop. You guys brought upon yourselves countless black names and spent endless blood and sweat. In your days, many people bled for the cause and finally formed Eternal Peace Empire to what it is today. Yet the new emperor pleading guilty will just wipe away all those 200 years of your hard work, those 200 years of soldiers sacrificing their lives again and again. This move is ruthless, truly ruthless." Emperor Yang Feng gave a dull grunt, and a tearing pain seared his chest. He wanted to cry, but there were no tears as he said astringently, "Yuxia, my good son, consider this a knife stabbed in my heart." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor remained expressionless when he said, "After entering the capital, I can contact our old troops. Most of the ministers of the Imperial Court will also support your majesty. With the Dragon Guard's forbidden army hidden in the 9 dragon veins, we can attack the capital city anytime. The only problem is that Great Thunderclap Monastery and Dao sect had left so many monks and Taoists in the houses of kings, dukes, and ministers to supervise them under the cover of begging. Cult Master Qin, I will have to use the power of Heavenly Devil Cult to send us into the city to meet them." Qin Mu shook his head and said, "There's no need for so much trouble." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was slightly stunned. The forces of Great Thunderclap Monastery and Dao sect are too spread apart. They want to control the entire situation, but this leaves flaws everywhere. Qin Mu stopped. They were currently in Marquis Town, just a few hundred miles away from the capital, and in front of a fried pancake stall. Qin Mu went to buy breakfast while he said, "It's like this fried pancake, once it's too spread out, it will collapse at the first blow. The bigger their pancake is, the thinner it will get. When the crown prince ascends to the throne, there won't be enough power to guard him. The monks and Taoists that were left in the houses of kings, dukes, and ministers will then be controlled by those kings, dukes and minister instead. Those people won't be able to go to the imperial city to provide support. The fried pancake was done, and the stall owner used oil paper to roll it up. Qin Mu took it from him and gave it to Imperial Preceptor's wife first. She took a bite and looked around with bright eyes. She asked in a low voice, "Aren't you afraid that walls have ears?" There were quite a lot of scouts of the Crown Prince on the way here. "I'm not." Qin Mu smiled lightly. Suddenly, the passers-by, merchants, vegetable sellers and buyers, butchers, and hawkers in the market all quietened down and turned their heads over in unison. Their gazes all landed on the group. "Cult Master," those people said in unison. Qin Mu waved his hand and smiled. "Continue doing what you were doing, don't disturb us." Imperial Preceptor's wife jumped in shock, and Emperor Yangfeng sighed. Strict enforcement of rules and prohibitions leads to the rise of a king. "Cult Master Qin, you have scared me, your heavenly saint cult has scared me." "Eternal peace," Imperial Preceptor said. "Strict enforcement of rules and prohibitions, to move as one, this is the scene of the rise of a king, an emperor. Your Majesty should really worry." However, ever since Heavenly Saint cult was founded 20,000 years ago, there had never been a cult master who referred to themselves as an emperor. "Your Majesty can be at ease." Emperor Yangfeng said angrily, "You are all part of Heavenly Saint cult, even your husband and wife are also part of Heavenly Saint cult, a heavenly king and an incense master. Only I'm the outsider here, don't try to mislead me." Qin Mu immediately asked, "Does your Majesty want to join our cult? How do we enter the capital?" When they came close to the city, Emperor Yangfeng looked at the city gates and saw that they were heavily guarded. There were thorough inspections, so it was going to be as difficult as to climb up to the sky for them to get in. Today was the Ascension of the Crown Prince, the day he would become the new emperor. Today, the new emperor would seek punishment from heaven at the Temple of Heaven. All the envoys, cult masters, sect masters, heads of influential families, as well as civil and military officials would have to go forward to attend the ceremony. So there was a tight security. Qin Mu shook his head and said, "No problem, let's just go in directly." Emperor Yangfeng was slightly stunned. Qin Mu brought them to the city gates, and the soldiers there treated them like air and let them walk into the city. They are also part of Heavenly Saint cult. Imperial Preceptor's wife was slightly stunned and said to Qin Mu in a low voice, "The Emperor is around, so don't be too flamboyant, otherwise, you will cause His Majesty to be suspicious and jealous. The Emperor wants to create a country that's above the sects, and not a sect that's above the countries, be cautious Cult Master." Qin Mu looked at Emperor Yangfeng, and he was indeed looking worried. This was very normal. If all the imperial guards guarding the city gates of the capital were people of Heavenly Devil cult, how could he be at ease? "Eternal peace," Imperial Preceptor said. "Now that we have entered the city, what should we do?" Qin Mu took out 2 medicinal pills and handed them to Emperor Yangfeng and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor respectively. He said, "We'll go to Imperial City and the Temple of Heaven to see the Ascension of the Crown Prince." In the Imperial City's throne room, a greeting could be heard. "Long live your Majesty." Eternal Peace Crown Prince Ling Yuxia sat on the dragon throne while donning the dragon robe. On one side of him stood a monk while on his other side, there was a daoist. Below him were the civil and military officials that were paying their respects to the new emperor, which created a powerful and dynamic scene. There was an extremely huge number of civil and military officials, so the entire imperial hall was filled with officials kneeling down. There were also others who were kneeling outside the hall, and some even at the steps. In the hall, envoys from dozens of countries carried military banners from their countries to attend the ceremony. Near them, there were sect masters and cult masters from dozens of sects. The ceremonial rites for the ascension of a new emperor were rather complicated, so when the ceremony ended, it was already close to the afternoon. The sun of spring wasn't warm as Ling Yuxia walked in the front and led the civil and military officials out of the hall. The ceremonial weapon carriers followed him closely, and most of the people in the ceremonial weaponry were monks and Taoists, who chanted Buddhist and Daoist scriptures with resonating voices. Behind them was the crown prince's concubine leading a crowd of palace maids with the envoys following behind them. All the heads of the influential families and sects also followed them to Temple of Heaven, the scale of the crowd becoming greater and greater. And Caesar. Behind Ling Yuxia were his Grand Protector, Grand Preceptor, and the rest of the first-ranking high officials. They were the retainers of the imperial family, the arms of the crown prince, and had extremely high positions. Now that the emperor had died, Ling Yuxia naturally became the one to assume the throne. Since he knew that his foundation in the imperial court was still not stable, he had invited numerous monks and Taoists from Great Thunderclap Monastery and Tao sect, making them officials while demoting those that weren't willing to heed his words. Almost half of the civil and military officials of the imperial court were monks and Taoists, so the sight was rather peculiar, as they chanted scriptures while heading to Temple of Heaven. As for Duke Wei, King of Mount Tai, Pillars of State, General of Heavenly Strategies, and the rest, Ling Yuxia had permitted them to retire because of their old age. They would be staying in the capital city for the moment and return to their hometowns after the ceremony. In the imperial court, almost half of the officials had to return home due to old age, even though some of them were still very young. It was quite a strange incident. Ling Yuxia didn't feel certain about these officials that were told to retire, so he didn't dare to let them out of the capital in fear of them rebelling. Because of that, they were all held captive in their respective manors, with monks and Taoists guarding them. Meanwhile, King of Mount Tai, General of Heavenly Strategies, and the rest were locked up in the prison. They reached Temple of Heaven and the officials flooded out. The monks and Taoists stood on the left and right sides of the steps respectively, while Ling Yuxia dragged his dragon robe and climbed up the steps by himself, acting reverent and respectful. Meanwhile, his concubine and those alongside her knelt down at the bottom of the stairs. The stairs were very long, with 999 stone steps. When Ling Yuxia reached the top of the Temple of Heaven and wanted to kneel down respectfully, a solemn voice suddenly rang out. Buddha Rulai of Great Thunderclap Monastery has passed down his decree. May your majesty receive the decree. A monk walked out with a solemn expression, and the Buddha rays behind him formed a wheel. In his hand was Rulai's decree. Ling Yuxia immediately knelt down to receive the decree, and said respectfully, "This guilty subject will receive the decree of revered one of the world." Below, the ministers of the old dynasty frowned and lowered their heads without a word. The other officials that were monks chanted loudly in unison with their Buddha voices, and Buddha aura soared with 10,000 fathoms, resulting in a magnificent sight. There was a deluge of heavenly flowers in mid-air, and the apparitions of gods and Buddha appeared. With the brilliant and varied visions, it seemed like gods and Buddhas were blessing this ceremony. The monk read out Rulai's decree and said mainly that Emperor Yangfeng was a tyrant, because of which the people had to suffer heaven's wrath. Rulai encouraged the new emperor to be cautious and conscientious, to scrupulously abide by his duty, so the gods and Buddhas would bless him with prosperity and longevity, and so on. The crown prince received the decree. A Taoist came out then, and in his hands was a decree from Tao Master. Tao Master of Tao sect has passed down his decree. May your majesty receive the decree. Ling Yuxia knelt down once again. This guilty subject will receive the decree of Tao Master. The Taoists among the civil and military officials were not to be outdone. They played around with their vital qi, and created auspicious visions of dragons and phoenixes dancing in the sky. Tao Master's decree also contained nothing more than encouragement for the new emperor to treat his citizens sincerely, to look after the office, and to not to mess around with things like reforms and so on. The crown prince received the decree and rose. After tidying his robe, he was about to kneel down and seek forgiveness from heaven, but at that moment, a loud and clear voice came from afar. The cult master sacred teacher of heavenly devil cult passes down his decree personally. May your majesty receive the decree. When this sentence was heard by everyone, a commotion broke out under the Temple of Heaven as the people all looked towards the source of the voice. With a couple of steps, Ling Yuxia came to the stairs of the Temple of Heaven and looked down. From his position high above, he saw a youth bringing along 2 monks and a Taoist nun towards the Temple of Heaven. The footsteps of the 2 monks seemed to be weak and unstable, while the Taoist nun seemed to be pregnant and so inconvenienced by her body. Qin Mu smiled and walked towards Temple of Heaven while saying leisurely, "Great Thunderclap Monastery, is a sacred ground, Dao sect is a sacred ground, my heavenly devil cult is also a sacred ground. Ling Yuxia, Rulai and Dao Master didn't come yet, you still knelt down for their decree. Now that I have come personally, aren't you going to kneel to welcome me? Heavenly Devil Cult Master. Suddenly, a sect master from an influential family sprung forward, wishing to land a killing blow on Qin Mu. At this moment, a huge flag appeared out of thin air beside Qin Mu and rolled up to block an attack from that sect master. When that huge flag was unfolded, a formidable man carrying a sword case showed up. A sword light then flew out and severed the head of the rash sect master. The man that was carrying the sword case swept up his huge flag and disappeared along with the head of his victim. Among the people attending the ceremony, a headless corpse swayed and collapsed to the ground. Qin Mu acted as if nothing had happened and continued to walk forward. When there were guards who wanted to make a move, huge flags appeared at the very instant they moved, and hall masters, elders, supervisors, and heavenly kings of heavenly devil cult appeared. As the huge flags fluttered in the air, they materialized and vanished all around the place. When they were finally gone, dozens of headless corpses were on the ground. Qin Mu brought Imperial Preceptor and the Emperor forward. Around them, flags kept materializing and vanishing from time to time. Those who tried to attack him were all assassinated in a violent manner. A trail of corpses was left behind on the path Qin Mu took, and all the bodies were missing heads. Qin Mu walked to the front of the Temple of Heaven, and was about to walk up, when the Crown Prince's concubine, that was kneeling below suddenly made a move. The moment she did that, she became a corpse on the ground. The hair of the envoys, sect masters, cult masters, and heads of the influential families stood up on ends, and they dared not make another move. Heavenly Devil Cult was the #1 sacred cult of the Devil Path. The crowd had long heard of their reputation, but only now saw it for themselves. "Wife, don't look," Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor told his wife. Qin Mu began walking up the steps of the Temple of Heaven, and an eminent monk suddenly shouted out, "Heavenly Devil Cult Master, we have been waiting quite some time for you. Fellow Dao friends, encircle and annihilate Heavenly Devil Cult Master to subdue the devil." The monks ripped off their official robes while Taoists took out their sword pellets. In an instant, murderous aura rushed toward the sky in the Temple of Heaven. Qin Mu continued to walk forward. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Over 300 huge flags appeared, and 360 Hall Master materialized together. The 12 cult protector elders, 2 great cult heavenly kings, and the 8 great supervisors also showed up. Sounds of slaughter rang out in the Temple of Heaven. The 8 great supervisors didn't make their moves, but instead circled around Qin Mu. Murderous spirit filled the heaven over the Temple of Heaven as cult master level existences, great experts of life and death realm, and celestial being realm waged, causing heaven to fall and earth to crack. The loud booms nearly crumbled all the palaces that surrounded the Temple of Heaven. Imperial City was in a state of chaos, and the guards hurried over. The capital city was also alarmed, and influential families that were lying low exploded with world-shaking powers. The monks and Taoists that wanted to provide support to Imperial City were all trapped and killed on the spot by those influential families. In the prison where General of Heavenly Strategies Qin Jian, High Official Su Yunji, and others were sitting, the gates suddenly opened. A prison head smiled and said, "His Majesty is back, he's at the Temple of Heaven." General of Heavenly Strategies and the rest were surprised and delighted. They immediately rushed out of prison and toward Temple of Heaven. "Where's Heavenly King Wei?" Heavenly King Yu shouted out loudly. "Heavenly King Wei is right here." A thunderous voice spread through the entire capital, and Duke Wei leaped from Duke's Manor and crashed onto the Temple of Heaven. He was completely suited up and had a fierce expression. "Who wants to die?" Qin Mu walked leisurely toward the top of the Temple of Heaven. The Grand Preceptor of the Crown Prince and the rest rushed forward to kill him, but were stopped by Qin Jian and the rest, who had rushed out of prison. No one could interrupt Qin Mu's footsteps. On the top of the Temple of Heaven, Ling Yuxia revealed a look of panic, and looked toward the monk and Daoist on his left and right. These 2 people immediately pounced forward, but before their feet could even touch the floor, they were slaughtered by the 8 great supervisors, their blood spattering the ground. Civil and military officials, I'm the emperor. Ling Yuxia shouted out sternly. Do you plan on rebelling with these devil path practitioners and ignore my orders? Emperor. Emperor Yang Feng snorted and consumed the medicinal pill that Qin Mu had given him. His hair immediately grew out, and he wiped away the knife scar on his face. In a solemn voice, he said, "Take a look at who I am." Ling Yuxia's complexion changed drastically. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor also consumed the medicinal pill, and his hair also grew back. Wiping away the green birthmark on his face, he turned around. The civil and military officials had planned to make a move when they heard the new emperor's order, but when they saw Emperor Yang Feng and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, they all knelt down and worshipped them. Ling Yuxia rushed towards Emperor Yang Feng and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, in a crazed state, while shouting, "I'm the son of heaven." The 8 great supervisors moved and gave a blow each to Ling Yuxia. The man vomited blood, and his body suddenly transformed into a dragon, soaring into the sky to escape. The 8 great supervisors lifted their clothes up and vanished. The next instant, Ling Yuxia was detained by the 8 of them and knelt down at the center of the Temple of Heaven. Emperor Yang Feng looked at the civil and military officials and shouted, "Why aren't you guys quelling the rebellion? Why aren't you guys killing all these Taoists and monks that have rebelled? Are you waiting for me to make a move myself?" The civil and military officials immediately sprung into action and slaughtered the monks and Taoists of Great Thunderclap Monastery and Tao sect. Even the imperial guards that were rushing over also landed killing blows on them. When Qin Mu came to the top of the Temple of Heaven, Ling Yuxia was kneeling on the floor from the pressure, unable to break free. Qin Mu stooped down and leaned into his ear to say in a low voice, "Your Highness, I didn't do this to help the emperor. This is all for Heavenly King Qian and Heavenly King Lu of my sacred cult." Ling Yuxia was stunned and raised his head to look up, his eyes filled with disbelief. "You?" Qin Mu pulled out Junior Protector's sword and beheaded him with a single strike. Emperor Yang Feng and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor came to the top of the Temple of Heaven the moment the sword sliced down, and Ling Yuxia's head went flying high up into the sky. Emperor Yanfeng's heart trembled violently when he looked at the back of the youth before him. The sight of that youth shaking off the blood on the sword and returning it to its sheath struck fear into his heart. Imperial Preceptor's wife had also come to the Temple of Heaven. As she watched Qin Mu return the sword to its sheath and Emperor Yang Feng focus on his back, worry crossed his young woman's brow. The bloody battle was soon pacified. Those monks and Taoists of Great Thunderclap Monastery and Tao sect that could escape had escaped while the rest had been killed. The majority of them had died here, and their blood dyed the Temple of Heaven red. Blood trickled down from the 999th step all the way to the first step, then flowed to the feet of all the envoys, cult masters and sect masters. Temple of Heaven, this place in which tributes were offered to heaven, had been dyed the red of blood. It was impossible to say who was the first to suddenly kneel down and shout out, "Long live, Your Majesty." Whoosh! At the bottom of the Temple of Heaven, no matter if they were officials, envoys, sect masters or cult masters, they all knelt down on one knee and shouted in unison, "Long live, Your Majesty." Emperor Yang Feng turned around while standing at the top of the stairs. He spread his arms and faced the worship of these subjects. After a moment, he raised his hands weakly and said, "Rise." Imperial Preceptor's wife looked at Emperor Yang Feng. Behind him, Qin Mu and the 8 great supervisors were also standing on top of the Temple of Heaven and didn't kneel down. "Husband, it might not be a good thing for Cult Master Qin to show off his ability," she whispered to Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. He took a glance at Qin Mu and shook his head. To him, Eternal Peace Empire is just a place to learn through experience, so killing the Crown Prince is also merely an experience. He doesn't have much to worry about, and the Emperor does need his support in many places. Imperial Preceptor's wife was astonished. "Experience?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor nodded. "Experience." The Crown Prince colluded with Tao sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery to plan a rebellion, conspiring to murder the Emperor and seize the throne. The consequences of these actions were no small matter. Yet in the records of the scribes, there would only be an ordinary sentence which said, "On the 18th of the second month, Crown Prince Yuxia conspired to rebel. 6th of the 3rd month, executed. It was this simple. The details regarding this were not for outsiders to know. That's why most of the stories would only appear in history as popular legends. However, most of them were distorted truths, so they couldn't be trusted. After the rebellion came a bloody purge. The officials of the crown princes had their properties seized and families executed. The Taoists and monks from Tao sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery were detained in custody and sent to the execution grounds. Executions were carried out in the food market all the way from the 7th of the 3rd month to the 1st of the 4th month. Only then did the executions end. Some incidents also happened in the meantime. For example, the crown prince's head was not found. It had vanished without a trace, and no matter how everyone searched the surroundings of the Temple of Heaven, the head couldn't be found. In the end, Emperor Yangfeng never ordered anyone to dig into it. The emperor instead passed down his decree to rid Crown Prince Ling Yuxia's name from the imperial family's genealogical record. The crown prince's birth mother, the previous empress who was already deceased, was also demoted to an imperial concubine. Emperor Yangfeng then replaced the officials and selected a few younger imperial scholars from Imperial College to promote. He also selected capable people from each and every army to replenish the empty official positions. A few days later, the emperor summoned second Prince Ling Yushu back from the borders to talk about his duties. After a few more days, the emperor felt his body slightly ill and conferred Ling Yushu as the crown prince, to supervise the empire and manage all the politics. Emperor Yangfeng summoned Crown Prince Ling Yusha and asked him, "Yusha, now that you're managing the politics, what's the first thing you have to do?" He didn't view highly this second son of his. Ling Yushu wasn't considered outstanding among his children. Among all of them, he wasn't the one with the greatest resolution, and his aptitude wasn't the most outstanding, either. For those two things, he had admired Ling Yusha very much. That child had had the resolution, courage, and aptitude, however, he was too bold and too resolute. Meanwhile, his other elder sons had died too early while waiting for him to step away. Ling Yushu pondered for a moment. He had just returned from the battlefield, and the few months of experience had given him a pressing heroic spirit and some decisiveness. Because he was not in the capital city when Ling Yuxia had colluded with Great Thunderclap Monastery and Tao sect to rebel, he had escaped unscathed. Ling Yusha said solemnly, "Son will abolish big brothers." Emperor Yanfeng's expression sunk. "You're the eldest son now, I don't have a son like him." Ling Yushu paused for a while, then said, "Son will abolish the treaties he had signed with the foreign countries and take back the land we have given away. I'll then purge those sects that had tried to swallow the lands during the chaos." Seeing how Tao sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery have suffered such a defeat and lost a great number of experts, I will take back more than half of the lands that belong to Tao sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery. Emperor Yanfeng's expression softened and he asked, then, "I will help father send disaster relief, but before that, I will first write down a decree of my crimes." Emperor Yangfeng suddenly burst in anger and shouted out, "Say it once more." Ling Yushu bowed and said solemnly, "I will first write down a decree of my crimes and pray for heaven to not send any more disasters to appease the hearts of the citizens." Emperor Yanfeng's face was still grim when he said coldly, "Who taught you that?" Ling Yushu was slightly stunned. I asked, "Who taught you that?" Emperor Yangfeng rose, unable to restrain his anger. As he walked to and fro, he shouted loudly, "You are my son, I know you inside out, and you are unable to say such things." These words aren't what the second prince would be considering, but something that could only be understood by standing at the position of the emperor. "Say, who taught you that?" Cold sweat broke out on Ling Yushu's forehead, and he suddenly gritted his teeth to say honestly, "When I returned to the capital, I went to visit Imperial Preceptor, and coincidentally met Palace Grandee treating Imperial Preceptor's injuries. This son discussed with them about how father would inquire me about politics to test me, thus I asked them for ideas." Emperor Yanfeng's anger subsided, and he asked calmly, "Who was the one who suggests writing a decree of your crimes?" Both Imperial Preceptor and Palace Grandee said it. They said this calamity was the act of heavenly gods, so why don't we go according to their will and plan slowly? If we go against them directly, we will only be defeated. For me to write a decree on my crimes is better than Father writing it himself. If Father writes a decree, it will mean you that deny the reform, but this son is the crown prince, so I can feign civility. Emperor Yanfeng's expression softened and he sat down. I know your abilities and wisdom, your courage and insight, so I know you wouldn't have thought about such things yet. That's why there was definitely someone who had taught you that, and that's why I acted angry. Even if I'm asking you about politics, there's no need to follow what they taught you, you have to say your own understanding as well. Ling Yushu acknowledged. Emperor Yang Feng sighed. I'm not worried about Imperial Preceptor, but Palace Grandee. I'm afraid that when a day comes when Imperial Preceptor and I are no longer around, you won't be able to outdo him. Now that my cultivation is lost and my divine treasures are destroyed, it's hard for me to train my cultivation back. So I made you supervise this empire, manage all the politics. You should be cautious and conscientious. If I can't regain my cultivation back, my lifespan will at most be some 50 years. When that time comes, you will be the emperor. Broaden your horizons and also broaden your breadth of mind, think more by yourself. And at this moment, on Saint Arrival Mountain of Heavenly Devil Cult, Qin Mu led all the Hall Masters, Elders, and the rest of the cult to the graves of Heavenly King Qian and Heavenly King Lu. The latter had only left behind a pile of ashes while the former's body hadn't been found, so were buried in the grave were the clothes they had worn when they were alive. Qin Mu went forward and placed Crown Prince Ling Yushia's head in front of the graves, and everyone offered incense and paid their respects. Two heavenly kings, if your spirits can hear me, you can rest in peace now, Heavenly King Yu prayed. Now that heaven is sending disasters on us, troubled times and calamities are inevitable. Two heavenly kings senior brothers, do protect our sacred cult. After everyone paid their respects, they dispersed. Heavenly King Yu came to Qin Mu's side and hesitated before asking, Cult Master, is still returning to eternal peace? Qin Mu nodded. Heavenly King Yu was puzzled. This time our sacred cult took Imperial Preceptor, and killed the fake emperor, as well as numerous strong practitioners of Dao sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery. So I'm afraid that the emperor will be guarding against us. Isn't Cult Master worried about going back? Qin Mu looked at the gravestones of the two heavenly kings, and said with a peaceful expression, Dao sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery are still around. So the most important thing for the emperor is to get rid of these two big sacred grounds. Without getting rid of them first, he won't lay a hand on our heavenly saint cult. Only once he cleans up those will we need to be careful. As for now, there's no need to worry. Heavenly King Yu thought over it and realized that it was indeed logical. Qin Mu walked towards the sacred tree, and gently touched its grain. Lifting his head up to look at the crown, he said, the path of the saint is none other than the everyday use of common people. Heavenly King Yu, do you really think we can change the great Tao of heaven and earth? Heavenly King Yu walked forward and said, I'm naturally dumb and the question Cult Master asked is too profound. I'm afraid I'm unable to answer it. However, I know that there were no roads in the past, but as more people started walking, a road was formed. People then disliked having to walk in the mud when it started raining, and so they covered the roads with slabs of stone. The roads then became much easier to walk on. After that, people found walking slow, so they created wheels and vehicles. That's how horse carriages started to sprint through the roads. I think there was never a road for horse carriages, but after humans created it, there became a new addition to the great Tao of heaven and earth. Qin Mu was stunned. Heavenly King Yu continued, after that, people found horse carriages slow and created ships that could fly in the sky. They didn't have copper and gold, so they extracted them out from ores. Some letters were too far to be delivered, so they created flying mail. I think, as more and more things get created by the humans, the great Tao of heaven and earth gradually increases as well. Qin Mu was slightly in a daze. He saw that the sacred tree only had one trunk, but it branched out, and those branches had even more branches. While faced with that sight, he couldn't help revealing a smile. In the past, when winter came to the north, it was hard for them to eat fresh fruits and vegetables, but now that there are flying ships, the fruits and vegetables from the south can be transported to the north in a matter of days. In the past, there were inhospitable natural environments where demons roamed. Now we can cast spells to change the terrain, transforming barren hills and wild rivers into verdant hills and limpid water. In the past, the lands were infertile and not many crops could be produced, but now we can transform infertile land into fertile land, Heavenly Qin Mu said. In the past, wind, rain, thunder, and lightning were meteorological phenomenon, but now people can control these things. Cult Master, have we changed the great Tao of heaven and earth? Qin Mu nodded and smiled. I think we have. Cult Master, I'm naturally dumb. You aren't dumb at all. Qin Mu broke him off and smiled. Heavenly Qin Mu, you're a capable person, there's no need to always be so humble. What did you want to ask just now? Cult Master said earlier that the Emperor might make a move on our Heavenly Saint cult, after he eradicates the two big sacred grounds. I wonder if Cult Master has any countermeasures. Maybe Cult Master can also be an emperor. Qin Mu shook his head and said, I won't. As long as what the Emperor is doing is similar to our goals, it doesn't matter if I'm the Emperor or not. Furthermore, Imperial Preceptor is now the fourth Heavenly King of our sacred cult. If he doesn't meet with an accident, how would the Emperor make a move on us? In addition, I'm afraid it won't be that easy to eradicate Tao Sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery. Don't think too much. I've come to eternal peace, just for experience and cultivation. This video will end here.